We are counting down to the national championship game, and on the show today, we're going to be joined off the top of the show by Chris Felica from ESPN College Gameday, aka Bear. We are also going to be joined later on in the show by Mississippi State's Steve Robertson to get his take on all things Mississippi State. So sit back, relax, and enjoy as Heath and myself get you primed and ready for the national championship game between Alabama and Ohio State on Monday night, only on the Stingray Show.
The Dogs and Stingray are coming for you!
This is Stephen Ray, a.k.a. Stingray, coming to you live from Tuscaloosa, Alabama. Good afternoon, Mr. Feinbaum. Stingray here, and I'm about to shoot the bull with you like all the Auburn students do down at Auburn.
Worst defense ever!
So without further ado, here is the biggest Alabama going for the field goal. The kick is up. It is away. It is no good. Chris Davis bringing it out of the end zone. Oh, he's got blockers. Chris Davis up the sideline. Here he goes.
Here we go, guys. Dobbs back to pass. Launching the ball. Jennings, he's got it. Jennings, he's got it. Touchdown, Tennessee. They shocked the Dogs in Sanford Stadium. Are you kidding me? My God almighty. What an epic way for the Tennessee-Georgia rivalry to end this game. What a play. Wow.
Welcome into the 30th edition of the Stingray Show. I am your host, Stephen Ray. And without further ado, let me just go on ahead and bring up my co-host, Heath Hopkins, so that we can go on ahead and get to our very special guest. First off, Chris Felica. Heath, how are you doing today, sir?
Oh, Stephen, it's been a crazy day preparing for the snow here in the Memphis area coming this weekend.
I know, man, and you sound a little nasally. I hope you get to feeling better, my friend.
You know, I was just going to try to do my best Christopher Walken for you later in the show.
I got you. Well, let's go on ahead without further ado and get someone on the show who is a legend on College Game Day. He is a.k.a. Bear, Chris Felica. So without further ado, here is our very special guest, first one of the day, Chris Felica. Chris, how are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing well. Happy to be with you guys, and just getting ready to head down to Miami tomorrow for the national title game between Alabama and Ohio State. I'm just happy that we've gotten to this point. There certainly were some times this summer and fall where it certainly felt like things might be getting a little 50-50, I guess it would be the best way to put it. But we are here and looking forward to a great game on Monday night.
Absolutely. Well, real quick, do you have any updated information about the game? Because there were some rumors that Ohio State had reached out to Alabama and the SEC about possibly postponing it. What are your thoughts on that, and have you heard anything else?
Well, the game is a go. I mean, okay. Ohio State has enough players, and Bama, but yeah, I think there was a point earlier in the week where I think there was where Ohio State was certainly what I heard is that the Ohio State defensive line has some COVID issues. That there were a bunch of positives there, and maybe they wouldn't have enough players to play. And I think that was the crux of the issue. And I think again, there are two sides to every story, and the truth is always somewhere in the middle. And I think there was a school of thought out there that maybe Alabama, whether it's just their fans, and obviously Coach Saban's daughter had that tweet which she took down about that she thought maybe Ohio State was kind of embellishing the COVID test to try and get Justin Fields some more rest because they thought he was hurt. Justin Fields is fine. He has no rib issues. He had a little bit of a hip pointer, but other than that, he is fine. And the irony in all of that is that if there wasn't a delay, it probably would have helped Alabama
Yeah.
a little bit more because it would have given Jalen Waddle some more time to heal up and get more up to game speed, if anything else. But no, we are a go on Monday night, and can't wait to get down to Miami.
Awesome.
Chris, we talked briefly before the show. You're there in Connecticut right now, if I'm not mistaken, heading to Miami. Is when you travel to these southern and especially these beach places, does that make you a little bit more excited, or are you one of those guys that rather stay at home in the snow?
Well, no. I am. My nickname may be Bear, but I am not a snow guy. I would much rather be seeing the sun, seeing the sand, seeing the water. That's for sure. And normally, I would say, yeah, I do get excited about being able to be in one of these sunny, bright locations like we normally have in Pasadena or Miami. But just with the way things are right now in the world, we are essentially quarantined to our room. Once we get there, I mean, we can kind of go out and maybe grab some dinner and go back to the room. But we really can't venture out like we normally would. Like it would be a beautiful time to. If it were any other year, I'd probably be going down today or yesterday, getting down there nice and early to be able to walk around South Beach and maybe sit by a pool for a little while and just be around that nice weather, enjoy some nice dinners. But just with the precautions we've been told we need to take this year, I'll get down there and probably be in my hotel room most of Saturday night and Sunday before headed over to the stadium on Monday, which is fine. It was interesting. Gene Wojciechowski wrote a really nice essay a couple of weeks back about the 2020 season and all the twists and turns and highs and lows. And the final line was something along the lines of, "I'm glad we played, but let's not ever do this again." Those are my sentiments exactly. I'm glad we played. I'm glad we had a season. Hopefully everybody is okay, and let's not ever have to do a season like this again.
Absolutely. Well, what are your thoughts on the game itself Monday night?
It's such a hard game to forecast and handicap right now, just because we don't know the extent of and the names and the numbers of players that will be out for Ohio State if it indeed is their defensive line, which has been reported. I mean, they were a massive part of Ohio State's win against Clemson in the semifinal, just the amount of pressure they were able to generate on Trevor Lawrence and the way they were able to shut down the Clemson running game completely. They just overpowered Clemson's offensive line. And if they don't have a bunch of key players there, you're talking about, not only giving Mac Jones all the time in the world to throw, you're talking about giving Najee Harris running lanes that I probably could run through. Right. So that's a big deal. And then on the other side, how is the Jalen Waddle? Like, is this a Jalen Waddle legitimately is practicing and can play in the game and will play in the game and have an impact in the game? Or is this, let's throw out and float the idea that Jalen Waddle is going to play and can play and will have an impact on the game? That way, Ohio State has to take some valuable practice time and being able to prepare and shutting down an offensive scheme between Jalen Waddle, John Mechie, and Devontae Smith as well. So obviously a little bit of gamesmanship, so it's hard for me to really forecast when. I will say this. I do think Ohio State is one of the few teams in the nation that can match up athletically in terms of the players they've recruited and the potential pros they have on their team with Alabama. Whether it's good enough to win on Monday night is another story, but there's certainly Alabama takes the field with a clear, decisive athlete advantage, a massive one, probably all but 2 or 3 times during the course of the year. And this is certainly one of those 2 or 3 times during the course of the year that Alabama, at least on paper, is taking on someone that can play with them and match up with them in terms of ability, skill, and recruiting rankings.
Chris, if this game gets into a track meet, who does that benefit, Alabama or Ohio State?
Probably Alabama, just because you would think more possessions. Odds are, if Ohio State's defense is more shorthanded, they get more possessions will help them. I think in a dream world, Ryan Day would like to kind of slow the game down a little bit. Now, look, they have a couple of really good wide receivers of their own with Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson. And Ohio State fans are kind of talking about Trey Sermon, comparing what he did in the Big Ten championship game, the semifinal, and then maybe potentially the national championship game, right along the lines of what Ezekiel Elliott did in 2014, the Big Ten championship game, the semifinal, and the national title game. So I think in an ideal world, Ohio State will be able to get Trey Sermon a bit more involved in that running game, maybe try and help their defense out by playing some complementary football. But I do think if we're looking at a 42-35, 38-35, 38-31 type game, I think a higher scoring game would favor Alabama.
Chris, when you're doing your research for this game, what stood out to you the most? Something that just kind of shocked you when you were going through your research and just like, wow, really?
It's interesting you say that, because it has been how great these offenses have been in the first half and early on in the game. I think we forgot about Ohio State and how good and how talented they were, just because it almost felt like we went through the season with Ohio State, and they kind of felt like maybe we could give like a B- type performance and unveil maybe like 70% of our playbook, knowing that we can beat a bunch of these teams in the Big Ten. But like if you go down their opening drives, they scored touchdowns at 5 of the 7 games. They scored a field goal against Northwestern, and then the only game they didn't score a point on their opening drive of the game was the Clemson game. And oh, by the way, they scored touchdowns on their final 5 drives of the first half. So Ryan Day as a play caller, as a game schemer, is terrific. And then on the other side of the ball, if you look at Alabama, if you go back over its last 6 games and you take away the garbage time, kneel down situations, Alabama has scored touchdowns on 25 of its last 33 first half drives. So, like, again, Sark and what they have drawn up and doing offensively, with giving time to game plan and break down their opponent's weaknesses and come up with a plan to take advantage of that early, it has been unbelievably remarkable.
And you mentioned Sark. Do you think him taking the Texas job will have an impact on this game and be a distraction for Alabama?
No, I don't. I think we've seen Alabama in this situation before, where they have lost assistance between the semifinal and the national title game, and it really hasn't. And I think the way the new recruiting dates line up, where you have that early signing day, which kind of has turned into the main signing day, and I think the fact that Texas's recruiting class has already been accounted for, and that was probably part of the reason why they kept Tom Herman on to save that class and allow those kids to sign, and then figure out, okay, if we're going to make a change, we're going to wait till after like the college football playoff anyway. So I don't think it's going to have any impact in terms of what Sark has been able to do in terms of getting ready for this game. I think that's been more of a recruiting thing, where coaches have had to get out there and recruit before that initial February date, which has always been the date. But now that you've got a majority of these kids signing in December, I don't think it'll have any impact at all.
Chris, how did you get the name Bear, and who gave it to you?
That would be Lee Corso, and it's funny you bring that up. That would have been 2003, I believe it was, prior to that Miami Ohio State Fiesta Bowl national title game. Anybody who has seen Kirk Herbstreit and myself out at dinner or lunch or just kind of hanging out know that, like, if there's any empty space on the table, that's like wasted space. So Kirk and I were having brunch, or a late morning, right around lunchtime, and we were sitting in the lobby of a hotel restaurant and just kind of hanging out in t-shirt, gym shorts. Just woke up. Didn't have any responsibility till later in the day, and Coach Corso walks by, and anybody that knows Coach knows that he is not bashful in terms of like sneaking in under the radar, going stealth, and worried about making an appearance. And he loves the fans, and he loves making an announcement, and he loves talking to people. So he sees Kirk and I, and he starts. He goes, "Yo, Kirk Herbstreit, Chris Felica," and like immediately everybody turns. Okay, here we go. And Coach comes walking over, and he looks at the table, and there's just food everywhere. And he looks at the table, looks at me, he looks at Kirk, and then he looks at me again, and he says, "Look at you, Felica. You're just like a big bear. All you do is eat, sleep, and I'll let you finish the sentence there. What that third word might be that a bear might do." So that is how I affectionately got that nickname, and it's stuck ever since.
Chris, when was your first year with College Game Day?
1996 was my first year with College Game Day. So Kirk and I started the same year in 1996, and I can remember the first SEC game that I ever went to as an employee. Actually, it would have been the first SEC game I ever went to. But I mean, when I was in college in Miami, obviously we played some SEC opponents, but it wasn't a true SEC game or a true SEC site. Would have been that '96 Florida-Tennessee game, that such a hyped game between Florida, Tennessee, Danny Werfel and Peyton Manning, and they ran that fourth down conversion to Riddell Anthony. That was an unbelievable atmosphere, and it just kind of opened my eyes wide open to an entirely different style and world of college football, and it was just tremendous. So yeah, 96 is Miami. Gosh, at that time we were still just an hour show at that time, and then the show grew from an hour to 90 minutes to 2 hours, and then eventually 3 hours. And it's funny, we always, every time the show expanded, we thought, oh, how are we gonna fill this time? How are we gonna come up with more stuff to put in? How are we gonna do that? And funny enough, we're to the point now in 3 hours, we're still sitting there like, okay, how are we going to get this into the show? How are we going to do it? We could use more time if need be. So it's just amazing to think back to the first year I was involved with the show 25 years ago to now, how the show has completely grown and being on the road every week, and just the fan spectacle that it's become.
Well,
to follow that up real quick, it's something that we always ask here on the show. It's a normal question that we ask all of our guests. What's your best Steve Spurrier story? You mentioned Florida. I got a feeling if you've been around Game Day since '96 that you covered the swamp more than once on College Game Day. What's your best Steve Spurrier story?
Well, it's not necessarily a story, but it's more of an experience. I can remember when Coach Spurrier stepped down from South Carolina that year, and we joined us on the College Game Day set. And the night before, we were actually in Michigan. It may have been, ironically enough, it may have been the night before a Michigan State game, or Michigan. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was definitely in Ann Arbor. And Coach Spurrier and his wife and myself and Kirk and some other people involved in the show had an unbelievable dinner with him. And he was just sharing stories, whether it was about him winning the Heisman, his time at Florida, listening to Coach Spurrier talk about like his life experiences, certain things about you wouldn't have learned. You'd bring up a certain game, and he would remember down and distance play call, what happened here. It was just kind of like that one experience of him recalling all of this stuff, and you're kind of sitting there like, "Well, this is unbelievable." That I kind of have like this like closed door session with Coach Spurrier, and I'm just taking in all of his memories and laughs and experiences. It was a pretty memorable dinner.
Well, speaking of College Game Day, my co-host is a Mississippi State fan, and you guys have been to Starkville back for the first time back in the 2014 season. Tell us your thoughts on your experience there at Davis Wade Stadium and the Cowbells especially.
Well, that was it was an unbelievable season because we wound up in the state of Mississippi 2 weeks in a row because we were in the Grove as well,
right,
for the Alabama's loss to Ole Miss. Well, but people always ask me like, what is my favorite location, what's my favorite site, and I know it sounds kind of like a cop-out, contrived type answer, but and I always say this: it is any place that we go for the first time, or any place that we haven't gone in a long time. and that weekend in Starkville was so much fun because you could just kind of feel like Ole Miss and State were both going to have this special type season, and Dan Mullen and the Bulldogs have rolled out the red carpet for us. It was a great experience. The game lived up to expectations, and we loved it. I mean, the people were great, and our show kind of kicked that day off, and with a little bit of a pep rally type atmosphere for everybody. And fortunately for everybody in Starkville, they didn't peak too early. They were able to peak during that game by beating up on Auburn, and ultimately are the answer to a trivia question now. And people always post a trivia question: who is the first ever number one in the college football playoff rankings?
Yeah,
just Mississippi State.
Yes.
Yeah, I hope that's not a claim to fame that we're saying 50 years from now. Yeah, I'm not feeling we will be, though. I'm a realist.
It's interesting. Like what a weird situation the last couple of years, because I think people had their questions a few years back whether Joe Moorhead was going to be the guy and he could get it done down there, because he didn't have a ton of SEC ties, didn't have a ton of SEC recruiting expertise, and then to have the Egg Bowl end the way it did in 2019, and you bring in Mike Leach, who certainly is a kind of a polarizing figure in the sport, and for the Bulldog season to end the way it did, certainly not the way you'd want to end 2020 heading into the 2021 season. But they were such a hard team to gauge this year because, I mean, it looked after that at the time, I mean, what they did to LSU in the season opener was like, all right, this could do something here, and Costello could have a great year. And then the offense struggled, and then they put that game together against Georgia when it looked like their season was just kind of like, okay, let's just get through it. And they nearly pulled the upset, and you're like, okay, now maybe they just had a couple of down weeks, and they kind of whoever was going to opt out and sit out the rest of the year, that was done, and the players were all kind of on that same page right now. And then the Auburn game was a debacle, and then we saw what happened in the bowl game. So I'm hoping that they both State and Ole Miss can be factors in the SEC West, because when those two teams are good, it gives, not that they're going to compete for the SEC West title every year, because that's certainly not going to be the case. But when a team like that has a magical or a special type year, or they do have a really good season, and they can threaten Alabama or LSU or Florida or Georgia and a crossover opponent, it just, as a college football fan, I like seeing dramatic, competitive games, and no one wants to see blowouts all the time. So I like when all these teams are good.
Yes,
Chris, I'll ask you a quick follow up to that. It looked like Chris Fowler that day wasn't too fond of the cowbells. I remember watching. I was there at Gameday that day in Starkville, but I remember I went back home and I watched it on the DVR. And you could tell Fowler was not too happy about the extreme loudness at the beginning of the show. And I laughed about it. Well, is Chris a perfectionist? Does he like things a certain way when he was with the show?
Perfectionist is probably the best word to describe Chris. He is uber prepared, and he wants things to be as perfect and buttoned up as they can be. And it's interesting to say that, because he is someone who can improvise and adjust better than anybody I've dealt with as well. Yeah, I'm sure. I'm trying to think back to the opening of the show. I think probably what the biggest issue was is he probably couldn't hear the traffic coming from the truck, the producer and the director and the CP talking to him, basically trying to lead him to whatever camera shot or video element that was coming up next. So it certainly, I have all these old game days on a DVD, CD-ROM somewhere. I'm gonna have to pull that up at some point and think back and watch that, because it certainly was. If you're right, and there was a little bit of an angst there, it certainly was not directed towards anybody in the crowd and the bells in general. It was more like I can't hear. This is really bothering me.
Yeah, he looked really flustered at the very beginning, like, this is really loud. Is this going to be like this all show? I mean, you could tell, like, oh, my gosh. Yeah.
I'll tell you this. I'll tell you this. They gave us all cowbells as well, and I know people still got them. So we like gifts. So it was fun to get one of those.
Hey, who's been your favorite celebrity guest to come on the show? It was someone that you really enjoyed meeting and getting to talk to.
There have been a couple. Ken Griffey Jr. was terrific. Because not only was he a picker, he hung out on the bus for a good part of the afternoon, just watching games, telling baseball stories, talking him and Randy Johnson. That was a ton of fun. Bill Murray hitting the plastic golf ball over my head on the when we were at Clemson, when he planted the spear in the ground and was wrestling Coach Corso. That was a good one. Jake Olson, when he was a young boy, when we first did that story years ago.
Yeah.
He and his family came on the bus. I don't know if he was necessarily the guest picker that day. We may have just had him on the set after we did the piece. But I remember he and his family came on the bus for a while, and we're talking as games were going on. And I still remember to this day, we were talking, and no one was really watching the games. We're just kind of going back and forth. And like there were like 4 games going on at the same time, and all of the noises and such are blending over each other. And it was a bowl game, and all of a sudden, like, and Jake goes, like, who just turned it over? And we look, because no one's really watching. Like, oh yeah, I forget who. It might have been a Penn State LSU or whatever it was. It was the Citrus Bowl in Orlando. Someone had committed a turnover in the game, and he was able. His senses, because he was so reliant on something other than vision, all of his other senses just amplified. No one's paying attention to these games, and while everyone's talking and games are going on, he's like, we just turned it on, and sure enough, it was a turnover in a game, and like everyone, I was just like amazed and bewildered, like I can't even tell what's going on in a game if I'm like paying attention to it, and here's this young kid dealing with tragedy and overcoming it, and he has a better awareness of what's going on in the game than any of us. So that was pretty remarkable as well.
Wow. That is remarkable.
Well, I'm going to put you on the spot. If you had to pick right now, who wins Monday night, Alabama, Ohio State?
Right. If I had to pick right now, I would say Alabama. I have a little bit of concern if Ohio State is indeed going to be able to stop them. 8.5 points seems like a lot to lay. So I don't want to make an ATS pick right now, but if I had to pick right now, I would say Alabama, just because of the potential losses on the defensive line for the Buckeyes, and it's going to be hard for them to play a game at that level. I think 2 weeks in a row, like they didn't get up for Clemson and play at the level that they did against the Tigers on New Year's Day. To come back and be able to play that well again, that's a pretty high bar to be able to match that, and that's the type of level that they're going to need to reach to pull an outright upset. They certainly can, but I think the odds are a little bit against them.
Chris, who's somebody that y'all pick on the most on set there on game day?
Oh, easily Herb Street. Because he's such an easy target, because he's so easy. It's so easy to press his buttons. It's so easy to wind him up, and he gets so animated and like discombobulated when you do it. It's he starts laughing, and he takes it personally. He doesn't take it personally. I'm trying to think of the right word, but it's just he gets so animated, and at times like he thinks like we're serious every now and then. But it's one of those family type atmospheres. You kid him because he's the best analyst in the sport, and the person you see on the air is the person that he is off the air. So he's just kind of like everybody's like big brother or kid brother that you just want to poke and prod him and get them all riled up and wound up. But it's easily Kirk.
You know, with Coach Corso not being able to be on set this year, has that really affected the show some, the chemistry?
It hasn't affected it as much as I would have thought it would have. I thought there would be times where there could be a struggle in communication, but I mean, we've done a very good job of setting an order within the show, where kind of like making sure that Kirk is always the person following coach or always the person leading to coach. Because I mean, the biggest issue, the biggest thing that we don't have this year is coach on the set with Kirk. As people are sure have noticed, like in recent years, and since coach had his stroke, coach was always like Kirk, as by the way, son of a coach and someone who played football his entire life, like has that reverence towards a coach, and he sees Lee as kind of like that father figure as well. So like he was always there to like he could always get that sense like if coach was going to struggle, or he could kind of sense him kind of a little bit of confusion. He would always be quick to jump in, step in, and kind of help him out, bail him out a little bit. And like coach didn't have to say anything. So that's the one thing that we've missed, and obviously having the interaction between coach at site and our celebrity guest picker with the headgear, that we missed out on that dynamic as well. But all things considered, like I said, I was like, do we really want to do a guest picker this year? It's going to be okay. How's coach going to be? Like in terms of pushing the envelope and keeping the show as, I guess, normal as it could have been. I'm really proud of the way we were able to pull this off this year, because we could have done it NFL draft style and had everybody from their home and done a Zoom call and virtual fans as well. But being not only for the fans out there who watch and some who were able to attend games, at least be there, but for us as a show group ourselves, like it was. While there was some anxiety involved in travel but which everybody's dealing with, it was therapeutic I don't want to speak for everybody on my show, but I know at least for me, it was good to get out and kind of, if nothing else, if the travel wasn't normal, of being kind of quarantined to a hotel room for a while on Friday, and going back and not having a bus to watch games on Saturday, and being in a different truck than normal during the ABC primetime game on Saturday night. If all that wasn't normal, the 3 hours on the set from 9 to noon were really, really therapeutic for me, in just kind of having like, okay, this feels right. This is what I'm used to. Right. I'm on a college campus. I'm inside a stadium. I'm amongst my friends and crew members here. This just feels right, and it was good to be able to get out and do that. Because I mean, my wife, and I'm sure she's not alone. Like, she hasn't left the state of Connecticut or for 10 months, and we only kind of go out and do whatever we have to do in terms of going to the grocery store and running errands and just kind of going for walks and things like that. So, people, the mental challenges of what we've been dealing with for 10 months certainly are hard for some people to come to deal with. So it was really good on my mind to help get out and be on a college campus, and hopefully us being able to deliver that show for 3 hours this season put some people's minds in a good spot and provided a little bit of a normalcy, I guess would be the right word for the full college football season. And like I said, hopefully next year things will be a heck of a lot better, and maybe we can kick off the season with a nice non-conference matchup between Clemson and Georgia next year in Charlotte. Don't flip the season. It sounds pretty darn good.
My last question for you, Chris, is this. We're talking about the future, and Michigan, I believe it was yesterday, added an extension to Jim Harbaugh's contract. Do you ultimately think he is the man to get it done at Michigan? And was this a good move for Michigan?
Yeah, I think it was kind of the only move that Michigan could make. I think Michigan was in a position where if Jim Harbaugh stayed, this was going to be the outcome, like reduce salary, kind of drag it out a little bit. But I think there was also a part part of the process there and the thought process there was if he does get an NFL offer or if he does want to leave, he can make that call and you kind of give him a soft landing, and it does good because he is one of their own, and there is a great amount of respect between the AD and Jim Harbaugh. And I don't think they wanted to make Jim Harbaugh look bad and just fire him and say we're not extending you, and then you kind of run one of your big alums and head coaches out. I think there's just a couple of different ways of looking at it. I mean, while Jim Harbaugh has struggled against Ohio State, who hasn't? While Jim Harbaugh has struggled in an underdog role, who hasn't? There's no debating, and there's no confusion. Like, they are in a much better position than they were when he took over. Like, if you look at even including this ridiculous year where it's always going to have an asterisk and you really can't draw much out of it. If you take the 6 years at Michigan under Jim Harbaugh, your win percentage says 17th in the country. I mean, that's good. But you take the 6 years prior to when he arrived, they were 53rd. So, I mean, it's a dramatic improvement. But the biggest issue Michigan has is they need to address their recruiting and the kids that they can get into school. The administration, the president is going to have to kind of get on the same page as the athletic department, or they're both going to have to kind of come together and be in agreement. Because if you look at Michigan's recruiting lately, like we talk about I said before the year how the gap between Ohio State and the rest of the Big Ten talent-wise was greater than the gap between Clemson and the rest of the ACC. And people kind of raised an eyebrow. I thought I was crazy, but I think this year kind of proved that. Like, Ohio State and Michigan aren't going head to head for kids. Like in the 70s and 80s and 90s and early part of the 2000s. Like, Ohio State and Michigan were recruiting against each other for kids from the state of Ohio or the state of Michigan or Western Pennsylvania or wherever. Like, but now Ohio State is recruiting Florida. They're recruiting. They're recruiting against Clemson. They're recruiting against LSU. They're recruiting against Alabama. They're recruiting against Tech. They're recruiting against all these other national programs. Where in Michigan is like plucking kids out of New York and Massachusetts and Rhode Island and New Hampshire. It's like, go down the Michigan roster and look at the number of kids from Michigan that are Ohio kids. Like, it's a completely different time, and they're going to need to address some things recruiting wise if they want to try and close that talent gap between themselves and the Buckeyes.
Chris, I got two questions for you. One's a fun personal question. What was the moment where, with you having your job with College Gameday, that it was a wow moment for you? Like, wow, I'm getting to hang out with so-and-so, or I'm getting to meet so-and-so right now. Who was a wow moment for you personally?
I think that SEC moment where I talked about that Florida Tennessee game was pretty cool, and then I think the first time the show went back to Miami after I had graduated, the 2000 Florida State game, to be on the sideline of the Orange Bowl, that unbelievable game with Jeremy Shockey touchdown. That was pretty cool, and kind of be amongst friends and see some old friends and colleagues. That was pretty memorable to see Miami win the national championship in 2001 and work that game at the Rose Bowl was kind of a wow moment in itself. But it's hard for me to point to just one, because it just seems like every week there's just something new and something different, and I never take it for granted. So I know that sounds kind of weird and corny, maybe surprising as well, but
no, not at all.
Yeah, I just think just the entire, and I still have them. Like I said, that's that Steve Spurrier again. When I was like, I'm just a schlep from Long Island, a sports fan who grew up on Long Island, a college football fan, and now I'm kind of like involved in like the biggest like college football show and like weird experiences. It's like being noticed, like my wife and I were on vacation in South Africa a few years ago, and being recognized by a couple of USC fans that were on vacation as well. Like you're halfway around the world, and like people, and just it was just weird just to see a guy and a girl just like oh yeah, and it was just stuff like that like gives me pause. I'm like, how the heck did I get here?
Right. You weren't at Tim Tebow's wedding when you were there in South Africa, right?
No. I did not make the invite. I'll tell you what though, had I been invited, I would have been there in a heartbeat. That's an unbelievable trip, and anybody who is fortunate enough once things get back to normal here, anybody who has the means and the time to be able to get to South Africa, I cannot recommend or suggest making that trip. It is a long flight, but there are some very humbling aspects of that trip that are good lessons for a lot of us. And then there's some unbelievable safari sites, and Victoria Falls and the city of Cape Town is just remarkable. So if anybody out there wants to take one of those bucket list type trips, I can't suggest South Africa highly enough.
Well, Chris, my last question to you for the day is, what's your favorite Coach Corso story that you get to share?
The funny thing is, it happened not even on a college game day. Well, one was college game day related, and one was back when I first started. We used to do the scoreboard shows and all of those segments back in Bristol, all throughout the afternoon during the show. And I can remember Wisconsin played somebody, and they blew the game. And Coach Corso, at the time, it was his pre-stroke when he was quick wit, spontaneity. He comes out and says something along the lines of, Barry Alvarez embarrassed. Barry Alvarez, he should resign or be fired as Wisconsin's football coach. And there was a coach decision he clearly disagreed with. And I think it was Chris Fowler who turns to coach, like, fired. They lost the game. You don't really mean that, do you? You're not serious. And coach goes, serious? I'm not serious about anything I say. So it was just like this quick-witted spontaneity. And then there was one time in Alabama when every week he wanted to try and one-up himself with this headgear pick and try and think of different ways to do it. And he actually wanted to get a live elephant to outside Bryant Denny Stadium for one of his headgear picks. I don't know if it was an A&M game or an LSU game or whatever else, but we're like, yeah, no, that's not gonna happen, coach. So I don't know what he came up with, but I give him credit. His mind never stops evolving of different ways to try and one-up himself each week.
Well, Chris, it's been absolutely phenomenal having you on the show. We hope that you can come back and join us here later in the off season. But thank you again for coming, and safe travels from Connecticut to Miami.
Thanks, I appreciate it. Yeah, we'll definitely catch up either in the off season or next year.
All right, and Chris, listen, we hope we didn't take up too much of your time.
No, not at all.
Okay, good. All right.
I'm just sitting here. I blocked out a chunk of time and just get back to getting ready for the national championship game.
All right. Well, you be safe, and we will talk again soon.
Take care.
All right.
Thank you, Chris.
Man, that was a blast.
There was a couple more questions I wanted to ask you, but I was like, gosh, we've already taken so much of his time already.
Yes.
But huge thanks to Bear for coming on the show. Yeah. I don't think I'm in the right regard that I can call him Bear yet, so I'm going to call him Chris. But Thanks for Chris for coming on the show. It was fun to hear all those great stories. And I remember that 96 UT Florida game.
Yes, absolutely. Well, you were really good about getting our next guest on. So I'm going to pull you up full screen, and I'm going to let you introduce this Mississippi State legend. Oh, there we go.
There you go. The Dog and Pony Show continues. We can't continue without duct tape and dental floss, right? No, our next guest, one that I can say it, I'm a huge fan of. His podcast is a regular staple to my week. He is a best-selling writer, Mississippi best-selling writer. He's written several books. He has a book of poetry coming out here later this year, but he's written a book called Alpha Dogs that we'll talk about a little bit on today's show. He also wrote a book called Flim Flam that caused a lot of controversy, not only in the state of Mississippi, the Southeast, but also around the country. He has a podcast called The Boneyard that you can listen to 3 times a week. And he's also a reporter for 247 Sports, and he is a man of many talents and hats. Let's welcome the man that has 2 nicknames. He's known as Rose Bowl and also Beautiful Steve Robertson. Let's welcome Steve to the show.
Hey, thank you guys for having me. I apologize for the quality of the picture. I don't do this stuff very often, so we'll just kind of struggle through it here. I wish I looked as beautiful as you guys do today, but it looks a little rock and roll, I guess, a little 80s video. So
absolutely, man. Thank you for joining us.
Well, Steve, I will say this. I will not ask you to dance.
Well, I can do that too. I mean, I'm not really in the mood right now, but yeah. I mean, that's funny you mentioned that because so back in the early 90s, back when we used to play music, back when we thought we were going to be superstars and doing something other than writing, I was with a dance outfit out of Baton Rouge, a group called Savello. You can find our biggest hit on YouTube called This Jam Is Cold. But yeah, I used to dance regularly. I mean, I danced and, I kept my clothes on. But, I was a stage dancer and we had a good time with it. And so I've talked about that for years. And I guess people thought that I was just kind of joking around about that. And so I do a Facebook Live show, kind of periodically, at least once a week, sometimes a couple times a week. But one of the guys on there said, "Hey, man, at some point you got to dance on camera." And I was thinking, that's really silly. I'm not going to do that. He goes, "Well, I tell you what, if we beat LSU, you got to do it." I'm like, you know what? If we beat LSU, I'll gladly do it. And then lo and behold, we beat LSU. So I did it. And now people want me to do it all the time. I'm not going to do it all the time. I'm still semi-retired. But yeah, I mean, it's a good time. I mean, it's one of those things, too. A lot of people get so wound up with life and they take themselves so seriously. And, I enjoy dancing even now, even though I'm almost 50 years of age. I can still believe that I can get most people in the club. But, yeah, it's just a good time. And listen, there's so much of this in college football that we cover this, and everybody always seems to be so angry. And I've been felt guilty of that sometimes too. So I think it's okay to let your hair down a little bit, shall we say, and show the fans that, you can have a good time.
Well, since you are so well known with Mississippi State, what were your thoughts about the aftermath and the issue at the end of the Armed Forces Bowl? And have you heard anything about a punishment potential?
Yeah, all those are good questions. The first thing that I'll say is that I never support any of that. It's like, and I understand it. I don't appreciate it. I don't like it. And I think it paints both schools in a negative light. And I think the rest of that story, too, is that there's so many people that have kind of put this all on Mike Leach. It takes two schools to fight, and 2 certainly did. But, Philip Montgomery, who's a great coach, doesn't have perhaps the controversial name that Mike Leach does. And so Mike took a lot of the blame for all that. And I thought that was a bit unfair, to be honest with you. But there will be some disciplinary action taken. No word on that just yet, but I suspect that you'll see a couple players from Mississippi State suspended for the season opener next year. I don't think anybody's going to get fired or anybody's going to get kicked off the team. But, yeah, I mean, the sad part of it is State had gone through this mid-season roster purge, kind of found a sense of themselves, and played really well the last 2 months of the season. And you win 2 in a row to end the year, so you feel good about life. But this is really all that anybody's talking about is this, this fight. And, listen, I really think the 2018 Egg Bowl fight was worse than this. Mm-hmm. But it paints the school in a negative light, and you never like to see that. And it's funny too, though. We expect these guys to go out and play an emotional and passionate game for 3.5 hours, and then walk across the field and shake hands like we're all best friends. Well, that happens more times than not. But this situation here, Tulsa came in 6-2 and ranked in the top 25. And listen, we're speculating a little bit here, but as well as I do, all week long, I'm sure the speech was, these guys in the SEC are just as good as them, and then you lose, and that's a difficult thing to live with.
Steve, on the show, I tell Steven all the time that I'm tired of talking about COVID. I'm tired about talking about this fight. Yeah, I'll talk about Mike Leach all day. This year was just one of the craziest seasons that I believe I have ever seen from Mississippi State. And yes, it had to do with COVID and everything else. But has there been another program that comes to knowledge in the history of college football that dealt with a purge of the roster midseason? You had this transfer quarterback that came in that lit the world on fire, that he was getting Heisman hype after the LSU game, gets injured, kind of goes away, and then all these freshmen taking walk-ons and starting them, and what was it, 43 players to scholarship players to Georgia, and a total of 49 playing in that game. I mean, this was the craziest season that I believe I've ever seen, with so much drama, and it really wasn't. Not all of it was infused by the coaching staff or the players. But have you ever seen anything like this? And will 2021 just be totally, completely different for Mississippi State?
Well, we certainly hope so. But you're right. It's been one of those, crazy years. It was almost like, Chinese water torture in many respects. I mean, it's like just when you think, okay, all right, okay, no, Colin Hill has left the team. All right, that's the worst thing that could happen. And then, of course, KJ Costello struggles to read defenses, and then he gets injured. You're having to play Will Rogers, and you go on the road and play Georgia. And I think that was kind of a turning point for the fan base. It's like, you know what? We should have won that ball game. They were ranked 13th in the country, and we went down there and really had the lead most of the ball game and just couldn't finish. We just wore down. I mean, just didn't have, the depth to kind of finish it. But then a lot of people expected Ole Miss to absolutely just destroy Mississippi State. They didn't, and to give Ole Miss credit, Ole Miss was a better team this year. I mean, they simply were. It's difficult to admit, but that's the reality of it. They were the better team this year. They had home field advantage, but still, if Austin Williams holds on to that football and gets into the end zone rather than having the big defensive scoop play there, might be singing a different song today. But that was kind of a turning point. I think a lot of people expected State to get embarrassed against Georgia and Ole Miss. They didn't. And I think that really showed that Mike Leach had those players kind of buying into what he wanted to get accomplished. And that really showed down the stretch. You go back and look at A&M, one of the best teams in A&M history. Their only loss is the number one team in the country. That's a one-score game in the fourth quarter, and that's in the middle of all this chaos. That's, Colin Hill hadn't played for the first time, and you're kind of figuring things out with your quarterback position. I think that speaks well of the coaching staff and of the young nucleus of this team. It said, you know what, we're more concerned about who we are than who we're not. And I do think it bodes well for the future. That's the thing that's what's so crazy. You look at this offensive staff and this offensive team, just about all of your offensive production is going to be back next year. I mean, we're still waiting to find out what Osiris Mitchell's going to do. But Mississippi State's going to have, probably the highest percentage of offensive production returning next year of anybody in the country.
Yeah. One thing that I've noticed, Steve, and you probably have noticed it well before I did, the region media and national media, I don't think they want Mike Leach and Mississippi State to succeed. There's something there that they kind of want. They want to put Mississippi State in a box and keep them there. And there's so many positive things happening in Starkville right now. As you mentioned, all the freshmen playing, the young nucleus of guys starting to come together, the recruiting for the system coming in. There's so many more positives, but the only thing the media wants to talk about is, of course, Mike Leach in this fight, or they want to talk about all the players getting in the transfer portal and leaving. What is your thoughts of this team moving forward? Because I think 2021, not that I'm saying they're going to win 10 ball games, but I think 2021 can be somewhat of a big year for them.
Yeah, I think it's got the potential to be a good year for State. I think they're probably 2 years away from really being a great team again. When those guys will be juniors experience-wise, but, still going to be, a relatively young team that's got a lot of experience in front of them. But, back to your earlier point about Mike Leach, some of this is just kind of the price of poker when you deal in Mike Leach. I mean, he is a guy that, has been sometimes a little prickly with the media, and there's some people in the media that hold agendas against him. And there's a lot of things that he's going to say that are going to be a little bit silly at times. But there are a lot of people who are going to take things out of context to further their own narrative about who they think Mike Leach is. I think Mike Leach is a great fit for Mississippi State.
Yeah.
Mike Leach is a guy from Cody, Wyoming, and primarily he has been at land grant type schools. Texas Tech, not a land grant school, but out in a very remote location out in Lubbock, and then he goes to Washington State, the most remote outpost in the Pac-12 with the lowest budget impact in the NCAA Power 5 football programs. and he wins and nearly makes the FBS playoff out there. And so there's a lot of people out there that, for some reason or another, maybe it's political or maybe they don't necessarily agree with his methodology. They don't want to see Mike Leach succeed. And here's the thing I'll tell you about that is those people's opinion and 75 cents will get you a cup of coffee at the truck stop. I mean, it just doesn't mean anything. And that's one thing we talked about with all the fight stuff. Everybody's like, oh, well, this guy's saying that. It doesn't matter. I mean, it's simply not important. What somebody else goes and writes and puts their byline on, and they put it out there, that's their opinion. And it doesn't matter. It simply is completely irrelevant. That's one thing that I respected a lot about Dan Mullen is when Dan was here, he absolutely did not care about what other people said outside of the building. Mike Leach has that same mentality. He is more concerned about what happens in the building, what happens on the practice field. And listen, if you want to take something that he says and go write an article, and you go right ahead and do that. But he's not going to spend a lot of time worrying about your opinion because it's just not important.
Steve, staying somewhat with football here, going to your books. Let's start with your first book, Flim Flam. No one, I heard you say this on the podcast, no one really picked up the torch and ran with it when all this news was breaking. The Clarion Ledger kind of fired a guy who shed light on it and released him, but no one was picking up the story. And did you do it reluctantly, or was it one of those things like, look, if no one's going to do this, I'm going to do this? How did that all start?
Yeah, well, you kind of nailed it right there. And Raleigh Blevins left on his own. To be fair about that, I don't believe that he was fired. And so, but yeah, I tried to give this story to about a half dozen people. And what's interesting is, there's some people at the Clarion Ledger. I was like, this isn't really in my scope of journalism, but the NCAA has had boots on the ground in the state of Mississippi, and they're asking questions about a very popular football coach. And so here you go. I gave them names, numbers, and I offered them everything that I had. And nobody wanted the story. Nobody. And what's interesting is Sam Hall, who was the editor of the Clarion Ledger, some people went at him on Twitter as it looked like I was going to be right about this deal. Of course, I knew I was right all along, but as it looked like the tide was turning, some people were on Twitter going at Sam and saying, hey, Steve Robertson offered you these stories and you guys didn't do anything with it. Sam said that wasn't true. And I responded. I said, Sam, I still got the text messages if you want them. And that ended the conversation, and so, wow. But at the end of the day, I mean, it's like, I saw this as an opportunity to tell a story that a lot of people didn't want told. That's one thing. So I have a quote in my office that Edward Murrow said that the better part of journalism is telling stories that people don't want told. And this was certainly one of them. And the more reluctance that I got from the in-state media, the more determined I came to make this thing happen. And I never planned to write a book about the Ole Miss NCAA investigation, but I had a literary agent reach out to me and said, hey, there's going to be multiple books on this topic written eventually, and you're the best guy to write this. And so he offered me a book contract, and I took it, and little did we know it ended up being a national book. And it's so funny. Like I read these people, and I just laugh because there's some people out there and say, oh, well, the book didn't sell. Well, there's a lot of people that made a lot of money on that book that'll disagree. Again, it's kind of like those national college football writers don't like Mike Leach. What these people say on Twitter and social media simply doesn't matter. What they think, what they say simply doesn't matter. And do you really think that these people would publish a couple more books for me if the first one didn't sell? And so when I got done with Flim Flam, the plan initially was to write a sequel to Flim Flam. And I told them, I think we need to let this story play out a little bit more before we go back and revisit all that. And to be honest with you, I was really kind of tired of getting death threats and having my kids harassed on social media and things like that. So I said, listen, I really want to write a good news book. I want to write about Mississippi State sports, and maybe we still do a State Ole Miss angle. Let's write about the rivalry. And so I called Jackie Sherrill, and I called Ron Polk, and I called John Bond, and a lot of Mississippi State greats, and just said, here are some of my favorite memories in the rivalry. What are yours? And so I wrote a book about it, and it was a bestseller, and it was incredible. It was on the Mississippi bestseller list for 46 out of 52 weeks. And Luke, I see you up there, and Luke, I'm gonna comment on that. What I think smells worse is your attitude. I think your attitude is awful. And I think that you are a person that probably needs to go spend some time at church on Sunday because you don't bother me. You can say whatever you want to say. And here's the thing: no matter how many comments you write here, no matter how many comments you write on social media, you can't undo what's been done. You can't undo what happened with Hugh Freeze. You can't change the fact that he was tweeting out scripture in the morning and keeping with whores at night. You can't change the fact that your fan-based media people continue to carry water for him and defend him as if that he was this salt of the earth person. And you can't change the fact that every single one of them was wrong. So you go ahead and tweet and comment whatever you want to say. You will never change anything about what's happened. So go live with that.
And I apologize for that, Steve.
Yeah, I think it's kind of funny, Stephen. You are the admin to all this, but I noticed that Luke doesn't have a last name. Everybody else that comments has a last name. I wonder why Luke doesn't have a last name. Well,
again, Luke, you can live with it. I mean, it's just, it's one of those things. It doesn't bother me. They can say what they want to say. I live a great life. I got a great family. I got a lot of things that I want and all the things that I need. And so I'm happy. And, matter of fact, there's Luke might want to be watching here in the next few months. Pretty big announcement about some things related to Flim Flam that I can't really talk about just yet, but some pretty cool things coming. So we're going to revisit that story and probably tie up some loose ends with all that. So if you think that's over with, you're wrong. So, and that's another thing too, that I kind of laugh about too. It's like, I can lay out all these other things that have happened. There was other boosters that got disassociated after the NCAA investigation that hadn't been made public. Maybe we go ahead and do that. Maybe we go ahead and out those people as well. There's some other things that have happened about the potential tampering stuff. Maybe we just go ahead and publicize all that stuff too. So Luke, I mean, maybe I can give you credit in the book and the acknowledgments. Maybe you've motivated me to go ahead and tell a lot more of the story. So go ahead, keep poking the badger.
Steve, I'm going to throw a lot of darts at the dartboard and hopefully one of them sticks. You mentioned that there's going to be more news to Flim Flam. Now, Flim Flam was released, 2 years ago? Oh, 3 years ago.
2017. It was released September of 2017.
Yeah. With that being said, you said that there's some more news coming about that. Are we looking at, a mini-series, an extension of the book? I mean, I'm going to throw a lot of darts at the board, and hopefully you just say, yeah, it's one of those. But is it something where, there's going to be a documentary on this? Or are we going to see this on Netflix? Is it going to be something added to the book? Is it going to be a 30 for 30? I mean, is it something along those lines that we're going to see with Flim Flam?
No comment.
Okay. That's fine. All right, let's go back to Mike Leach for just a second. What is the craziest, wildest moment that you guys have had so far with his time there at Mississippi State?
That's a great question. I think under normal circumstances, we'd have a lot more time with him, because of COVID, everything has been virtual. But, one of the things that I'll tell you, the first time that I interviewed Coach, I'm thinking 20, 30 minutes, man, he went an hour. And, one of the things about Mike I think is really interesting that people don't fully appreciate is he is a guy that wants to learn. He wants to learn from you too, and so we talked about writing books a lot. We talked a lot about, Swing Your Sword and his book on Geronimo. And I was fascinated to find out, how did he get a copy of Geronimo's birth certificate? He has a copy. I mean, how do you do that? How do you get another person's birth certificate? So he took me through that process. And, he said that when he was a kid, first learning to read in Cody, Wyoming, there wasn't a whole lot to do. And so he went to the library and checked out the thickest book there was so he could have more time to read. And so it happened to be a book about American Indians. And he became fascinated with, with Geronimo. And so like you're sitting there and you're talking to him about finishing books. That's the thing I don't think people fully appreciate is it's fun to start a book. It's fun to outline a book. It's fun to interview people for books. It's fun to write a book. It's not fun finishing books. You got to go through all the editing process. You got to go through, all the rewrites, and you got to do a lot of fact checking, that sort of stuff. And so that all feels like work. I mean, you pick up the phone and calling Jackie Sherrill and talking about college football. That's a lot of fun,
right.
And then transcribing that interview is a lot of fun. But then making a story out of that, that takes a lot of work. And so those are the things that get you, kind of get you down. And then all of a sudden you go to a book signing out there and you see people and, people show up and like their family members are a part of your book or their family members are referenced in your book. And that's pretty exciting stuff. Those are the things that make it all worthwhile. All those nights that I sit up here at 3 a.m, researching a fact and trying to find a newspaper article to make sure that we got the numbers right on something That's all pretty cool. But Mike and I talked about that, and I asked him, I said, do you think you've got another book in you? And he goes, yeah, probably so, but it may have to be when I'm not coaching, and it is a very, very, very tedious process, but he enjoys writing the books. And, what's so interesting too, he and Bruce Feldman kind of co-wrote Swing Your Sword. But the more I've talked to Mike, the more I realized that, Bruce was just kind of like a mentor of sorts, that really it was, Mike's passion was kind of putting this thing together. And Bruce just kind of like helped him through, rather than, it wasn't like a co-written book in many respects. I know Bruce probably did some things to kind of polish things up, but yeah, at some point he's going to write another book. And it's interesting too. It's a fraternity, I guess you could say. And once you've been through that process and you know how much work it is, Mike and I kind of bonded over that. And we've talked several times about that. I said, I need to come by and get my book signed. And he goes, yeah, I need to get you to sign yours too. And so that's kind of a cool thing. But one of the things that there's so many people out there that I think are trying to go viral with Mike. Like, they want to ask him, Mike, do you like sweet tea? Who's your favorite Smurf? That sort of stuff. I think all that is really silly. And I think one of the reasons that I think Mike likes our beat is because we talk about football. We don't, because I think when that silly stuff happens, I think it happens organically. I think when you try to force the issue, I think people recognize that. I think Mike realizes that. And I really think deep down Mike enjoys entertaining people, but I think he'd rather talk about football or American history or something about that rather than, which one of the Powerpuff Girls is the most powerful. I mean, it's like, I think some people try really hard to be awfully silly to kind of get him off script a little bit. And I think that comes off real hokey, but I think, this year when he did the air raid siren during the press conference, I mean, that's totally Mike. I mean, nobody asked him to do it. I think somebody asked him to imitate it. Next thing you know, he's got a phone and he's talking about apps and that sort of stuff. That stuff is funny. I think the rest of it is a little bit forced.
Steve, I've always kind of made this joke. If we could just get Mike for the spring game or anything, interview with SEC Network, if we could just get him in a Strange Brew Starkville is Strange T-shirt, I think that'll be the gold mine for social media for at least a week of everyone playing on that. But staying with Mike Leach and everything, people want to knock about his recruitment. They want to knock about how he this and that, but Leach was never really in an area where he could really recruit strong. Lubbock is, far side of West Texas. And, of course, out in the Palouse, I mean, you're out in the middle of nowhere. I mean, you're basically in Canada. But, Starkville's different. He's close to a lot of big cities here. Are we going to see a bump in his recruitment? And it's also the SEC. There's players dying to come play in the SEC. I just thought that dynamic where people say he's not a great recruiter, but that dynamic of kids wanting to come to the SEC, and there's so many great areas, recruiting hot places here in the South that he can now access, whether it be New Orleans, Memphis, Birmingham, the Panhandle of Florida. He's got that access now. Where do you think he goes with recruiting?
Yeah, and that's a great question. That's one of the things that he mentioned when he got the job, is that one of the things that was attractive was the proximity to more Power 5 football players. And that's, Mike Leach has had one top 30 class in his career, and that was at Texas Tech. And he finished up at number 28. He's never signed the top 25 class. And so now you begin to think, okay, if he can put together a couple top 25 classes at Mississippi State, with their offensive know-how and that sort of stuff in his system, what can they do? I mean, they never recruited at a high level at Washington State, but yet there they were, going to the Rose Bowl and doing big things like that. And so those are the things I think are exciting is, what can Mike Leach do with SEC talent? I think when you saw down the stretch this year, we had guys like Jaden Walley, and I think that's a phenomenal story. Jaden Walley was essentially a high school quarterback much of his career. We thought he'd be a 2 or 3 year project and kind of develop into a wide receiver. And then he breaks every freshman receiver in program history, and so that's just one guy. Then you begin to think about this wide receiver class that they've got signed for this year, bringing those guys in. He's finding the pieces with which to build an offensive unit around. And you got Sawyer Robertson coming in, who is the highest rated quarterback to ever sign with Mississippi State. Listen, we've done pretty well at times with, some 3-star developmental type guys. But I think Mike, from an offensive skill standpoint, is going to take Mississippi State recruiting in a much different direction. We have had struggles for many years recruiting wide receivers, even when Dan Mullen was here. And a lot of that's because we just didn't throw the football.
Yes.
Today you pick up, grad transfer, out of San Jose State, just signed with Mississippi State earlier today. Guy's got 4 years experience, and forgive me, I'll look up some numbers here for you because I try to prepare myself. But
take your time, brother. Take your time.
But Trey comes in from San Jose State. 2019, the last full season, he had 79 catches, 1,161 yards. This year, in an abbreviated year, 45 catches, 627. This is the guy that's got nearly 3,000 yards receiving at San Jose State.
Yeah.
And so this is a guy that I'm told he can play outside receiver or inside receiver. He's a flex guy. They'll kind of figure that out in spring practice. But, you go out and you sign 4 wide receivers in this class, and now you bring in a grad transfer guy too that gives you some immediate help. And that's one thing that I was told is we had one spot left on offense for recruiting. We were only going to take a wide receiver if he was a difference maker. Well, there you go. You go out and you get a difference maker. You get a guy that comes in that immediately makes your football team better.
Talking about the receivers, and we won't stay long on this, but if we can predict next year in wide receivers, I don't know if Jalen Wally's going to be the leading receiver of this team next year. Malik Heath showed signs of being the most dominant pass catcher that we had. You got this guy coming in, transferring in. You got some other guys, some freshmen that are highly recruited. I mean, there's a lot of moving pieces to this offense, and it's already breaking records. But if you had to guess who are the top, 2, 3, 4 receivers next year, who do you think would be the top dog?
Well, I think if Malik Heath develops in the spring like we hope, I think that he's a guy that could be, a real difference maker. I think Tulu Griffin, you kind of saw late in the year, he has a real burst, and he's a guy that's just got to get a little bit bigger and stronger himself. Won the MVP of the Armed Forces Bowl, nearly took every kickoff back for a touchdown. I mean, it's just ridiculous. The most kickoff return yardage since the 2012 Egg Bowl for a Mississippi State player. And so that's exciting. But I think some of these younger guys coming in like Teddy Knox, I think he's a guy that's going to be a real difference maker. I think he plays as a freshman. I don't know if he is the guy, but I think that he's a guy that can make plays in the slot. And I think when you look long-term, I think you feel really good about guys like Antonio Harmon. I really like Rodarius Thomas, former South Carolina commitment in the in-state, takes 2 from South Carolina. And that's one thing that's kind of a misnomer sometimes is people say, oh, well, the flips always go away from us. But, State flipped a handful of kids this year, including Deshaun Page at Mike linebacker away from Texas Tech. They get Albert Reese away from Rutgers, and then you go out and go get a couple of kids from South Carolina. And that's the thing. Flips are part of the game. I mean, that's
right.
Part of the recruiting game. Even Alabama and LSU, have some guys at some point that disappoint them on signing day. And listen, you hate it when it happens to your team, but you got to respect the fact that it's just kind of part of the recruiting game.
Well, let's go to another sport. Obviously, baseball is about to jumpstart here in just a little while. What can we expect on the diamond from Mississippi State this year?
Well, pitching-wise, we think it's going to be as deep a pitching staff as Mississippi State has had, in decades. I mean, there's a potential to have 3 first-rounders on the weekend. There are a lot of people about Eric Sarantola, a Sunday starter. People tell me he has the best spin rate on the right-handed breaking ball in America. And
Wow.
you know what you got with Christian McLeod, and people love Will Bednar. He is an incredible competitor. He's got that rising fastball where he gets a lot of swing and miss, and that's one thing in this league. You want to have pitch efficiency. You want to let your defense work, but there are sometimes when you need to get a punch out or get a strikeout without somebody putting the ball in play, and he really excels at that and really kind of found his game out at Long Beach State last year in the series out there. So, and then you've got some junior college guys and some grad transfer guys that are come in that are hungry, and so they're going to be able to use them in midweek situations or perhaps middle relief situations on weekends. But if you can get Sarantola, Bednar, and McLeod to get you 6-7 innings on a weekend, and then you got Riley Self and Spencer Price out there in the back, you don't need to bridge a lot together to get a win. And I think offensively this team's going to be really good. I wish we had one more power bat. I mean, you don't have that Justin Foscue guy that can come up with 2 outs in the 7th inning and turn a game around for you. I think Cam James is a guy that'll make a big jump this year. I'm a big fan of his. Watched him play some this summer. He'll make the move from third to short, and he's put on some weight and is swinging the bat with a little more authority. I don't know that he's a 10, 15 home run type guy, but I think you're going to have a handful of guys that probably hit 6, 7, 8 home runs this year. I think the power numbers will be a little more evenly distributed, but I don't think you have that guy maybe outside of maybe Josh Hatcher or Tanner Allen that you have to pitch around. But those guys are both on the left-handed side. I wish you had one more right-handed power bat.
Yeah. What about Pimentel? Is he going to be a guy that kind of develops there out in right field and kind of become that power bat, or are we still going to try to work through that?
Yeah, Pimentel, I think it's probably the odds-on favorite to start it in left. He was there last year. Tanner Allen was in right and Rowdy Jordan in center. So, yes, I think Pimentel, he's a guy too that, he has some pop in his bat as well. But he was the guy that led them in hitting in the fall, but then he kind of struggled to hit the Division I breaking balls. It took a little while for him to get going. He showed some real flashes, but I'm told, he's the guy that could have a big year for State. And, again, when you begin to look around this lineup, there's not a lot of holes in it offensively, but you just don't, you're not going to have that guy that can come up there and hit a 3-run bomb, 15 times a year. I just don't think we have that in the lineup. I think you've got a lot of doubles hitters. And I think you got a lot of guys that won't strike out a lot. But, Josh Hatcher played first base for State, last year. If you remember, he won the first baseman job as a true freshman. And then once Sandy Cannizaro was dismissed, when Henderson took over, Josh left the lineup and Tanner Allen took over at first. And now Josh Hatcher last year was playing the best college baseball of his career. And then if it had been a full draft, Josh Hatcher would have been gone. I mean, if it had been, 20-round draft, there's no doubt that Rowdy Jordan, Josh Hatcher, Tanner Allen are gone. Well, that doesn't happen, so you get those guys back. And I think Hatcher is a guy that's poised for a really big year. I mean, he has hit some balls, off the batting eye in center field, to deep center field. I mean, if you miss with him up, he is going to make you pay for it. Yes. And I think that he's a guy that could, really be in contention for potentially some all-SEC type of awards this year.
And my last question for you is this. Obviously, the national championship game is Monday night. You like to talk X's and O's. Who do you like in that matchup down in Miami? Alabama, Ohio State?
I like Alabama all the way. And one of the reasons that I like Alabama is because Justin Fields is less than 100%. If you look at the teams that have given Alabama a little trouble, and even this year's Ole Miss team, it's the teams that are capable of beating you with the quarterback run. And so if Fields is banged up with those ribs and maybe they try to keep him in the pocket, and then he is an excellent deep ball thrower, but I think he is a guy that needs that run pass element to really keep those linebackers honest. And so if you make him one-dimensional, I think that really plays in Alabama's favor. And I think Pat Surtain not winning the Jim Thorpe Award probably puts a bit of a chip on his shoulder as well. I think he's a guy that wants to go play well. And let's be honest, I think most people, if we're being, take a deep breath and kind of look at this through the historic lens of college football, this might be the best Alabama team under Nick Saban because they've got such an explosive offense and they are better defensively. I don't know that they're the dominant defense they have been, but I think when you look at this team, how they match up in the secondary against those Ohio State wide receivers, I think they're capable of making plays. And I think Alabama's going to win it. And I think Najee Harris will probably have a really big day and probably be the MVP of the game.
Steve, we're going to have Jake Mangum on the show here after duck hunting season. That was his one request. He wanted to finish out duck hunting season, but sticking with Mississippi State baseball, when you were doing all these stories for the book, what was your favorite baseball story?
Oh, for Alpha Dogs, it was Rafael Palmeiro, without a doubt. And one of the things that I did is I wanted to cover Egg Bowls and I wanted to cover College World Series teams in Stark Villains and Alpha Dogs. And so I've done every Egg Bowl win from 1946 to 2019. And I've done every College World Series team except for 90, 96, 97. And I'll do those in the next book that'll probably be in 2022. But having a chance to sit down and talk to Rafael Palmeiro, about the genesis of his swing, about why he chose Mississippi State, about being here for Super Bulldog weekend and watching Bruce Castoria hit a home run to beat Ole Miss. And then Rafi said he turned to his friend Trenton Torsha, who was also a Diamond Dog, and said, "This is where I'm coming." He said they'd been to Miami games and they may have, 2,000 people, but you come to Mississippi State and it's like a football game, And so it was the atmosphere and the reluctance of Ron Frazier to play him as a freshman that led to him coming to Mississippi State, because Ron Polk told him, if you're good enough to play, you're going to play as a freshman. And so having a chance to sit down and talk with him about his life. And I'll tell you a funny story that didn't make the book. Is I saw Rafi a lot that year. You know, he was here for the statue dedication. Then I saw him out in Fort Worth at the Frisco tournament out there. Saw him at A&M. And it's like every time I turned around, Rafi was there. And then I was doing a book signing at Campus Book Mart, and him and Lynn walks in. And Lynn says, "Hey, we need to get a book while we're here." And I said, "Hey, Rafi, I'd love to get you in the next one." He goes, "Yeah, let's do it." So he gives me his phone number. I said, "Hey, it's going to be a few months before I reach out, but man, I'm really excited about this." So then a couple months later, I text him. And he didn't respond. I was like, this is going to be awful, you know, because I was so emotionally invested in that. And so I finally texted him. I'm like, "Listen, Rafi, I've got an M over S Thunder and Lightning tattoo on my left hand. I would never say anything negative about you. I don't even want to talk about Major League Baseball. I just want to talk about your Mississippi State experience." And so like 2 hours later, he texts me back. He goes, "Hey, can we do it tomorrow?" I said, "Yeah, great." And so I got him on the phone, and man, he would have talked all day long. And one of the coolest things that I thought about his story is that, you know, he's there in Omaha at the team hotel, and our fans are pulling up, and there's Rafael Palmeiro out there helping people with their luggage. And I was like, I saw this, and I was just blown away. And I said, "Why was that important to you?" And he goes, "I'll tell you why, Steve." He said, "This is my family." And he says, "You know, Mississippi State fans never turned on me." He said, "This is home. These are my people." And he said, "Why would I ever deny my chance, the opportunity to interact with my Bulldog family?" And I thought, here we go, one of the biggest superstars in the history of our program, regardless of sport. And he's helping people, you know, offload their luggage after a long drive into Omaha, Nebraska. I think that says a lot about Rafael Palmeiro and a lot about Mississippi State.
Wow, that does say a lot. And thank you for sharing that story. Steve, what's your favorite story of all the books that you've done? What's been your favorite story total?
Well, you know, I'm a little more partial to the Stark Villains and Alpha Dog stories because they're more good news type stories, you know. And you know, I would say from Stark Villains, there was a story I did. And if you've got the book, on the back of the book, I blurbed 4 people. You know, you have your little comments, what people say or whatever. So I had a comment from Ron Polk and one from Jackie Sherrill. And I believe I had one from Bob Tyler. And then at the bottom, there was a quote from a guy named Frank Carolla. He says, "I just didn't like Ole Miss. I don't know how much more I can explain that. I just didn't like them." And I wanted to put that on the back because I said there's a lot of Mississippi State people that feel that way. But Frank Carolla, when he was 19 years of age, he and his best friend Skeeter Edwards took a J3 Cub airplane and went over to Ole Miss and poured maroon paint in the bleachers. And then they had collected every piece of toilet paper in Leland, Mississippi, from every service station, and they went and dropped it on Fraternity Row at Ole Miss. So they effectively painted the Ole Miss campus maroon and white. And I've had so many college kids come up to me and say, "Man, I love that story." I mean, can you imagine 2 19-year-old kids flying a crop duster over there and, you know, doing all that kind of stuff? You know, I don't support vandalism, but it was great to find a guy in his mid-90s that had a story that most people had never heard. And maybe I'm a little bit melancholy because Harper Davis has recently died, but yeah, I'd always been fascinated about the Alan McKean era, and I wanted to really know why we fired him. I mean, you hear things, but you know, Harper Davis was on that final team in '48, so I had the privilege of interviewing Harper Davis this year and telling his story, and it meant a lot to me. Not just because I got to get some insight on Alan McKean, but Harper Davis, Mississippi State's very first round pick in pro football. And, you know, I think the first 10 minutes of the interview, he interviewed me. Want to know how I became a Bulldog, who my dad was, where my people from, you know. And he loved Mississippi State. And he talked about when he married his wife, all of her sisters married Mississippi State guys. You know, he said, so none of the kids ever had a chance to go to school anywhere else. You know, everybody was going to be a Bulldog. But, you know, Harper Davis was a guy that, you know, I shared this in the book. You know, when the war ended, it was kind of a land grab. You know, everybody was trying to – the NCAA allowed these veterans to maintain their eligibility, go on to college on scholarship. And Harper talked about that, about how he had gone to a high school football game when Clarksdale was playing at West Point, and they spent the night and went and watched Mississippi State play the next day, and Blondie Black ran all over the competition. And Harper Davis said, right then, as a 17-year-old kid, he said, if I ever got the chance to go to Mississippi State, I want to go be Blondie Black. That was his hero. And then eventually they became friends. Like after they both graduated state and he kind of moved on with life, Blondie Black and Harper Davis got to be friends and played golf regularly. And I think that is a really cool thing, you know, to think that, you know, as a high school kid, Blondie made such an impression on him. And then ultimately they end up being part of the same football fraternity and become friends to the M Club. And I think that's amazing. But yeah, Harper Davis, I don't know that we've done enough to honor him, but I'm really grateful that he had a chapter in my book.
Steve, I'll stay here all afternoon and I won't. I'll wrap this up. But I've heard you tell stories before that your favorite player was John Bond and played in the backyard. When you were a kid, you were always John Bond. For me, I was Sleepy. Always wanted to be Sleepy. And still to this day, when I still think number 15 on a jersey, my first thought is Sleepy and not Dak. But with that being said, what's your favorite John Bond story?
Well, there's a bunch of them. I always joke with friends of mine, from back home. I said, 9-year-old me would be awfully impressed that I have John Bond's phone number, and I can text John and he'll text me right back. And it was so great when I wanted to interview him, for Stark Villains, because I told him, I said, JB, you played in some memorable Egg Bowls, but the only ones anybody wants to talk about are the two you lost. And that's the John Forcade game, when they had the phantom pass interference penalty and Forcade scored on the last play. And then you had the blown back game. And those are two legendary games, and we lost them. And it just kind of shows you the color of the rivalry, that we remember. I mean, here we are, 40 years later, and we're still talking about those. I said, well, JB, I want you to talk about all of them, not just the ones you lost, but the ones you won. And he said, thank you. He said, that's the only thing we've ever asked him about. It's the games that I lost. But, the thing about JB that I love is that he is true Maroon. At any point, if you get him around, and I've talked to him some on the sidelines at ball games, he comes around, he hangs around, and that same fire that he had as our quarterback, from 80 to 83, it still burns. He's a high school coach now and doing well, and, kind of mentoring young men down there. But when he is at Mississippi State, he'll always be Bond. And, he may cut his hair a little bit, but, he is our guy. And that's the thing that really fires me up is that, when John comes around, if you're walking with him towards the stadium, there's people that come running up. I mean, you'll have people our age who come running up to John like they're kids. I mean, they're like, hey, John, can you sign this? Can we get a picture, And I'm glad that John gets that. You know what I'm saying? It's like, I'm glad that John is still remembered for being one of I get chills talking about it. I mean, because when I was a kid, John was my hero. And I'm so glad that he hadn't been forgotten. There's like, even this new generation of kids, some of them have heard stories from their parents about how great John was. And, and there have been so many of our guys that have come through and matured, and they're kind of a footnote in Mississippi State history, but not John. I think John is still recognized as one of the best to ever wear the uniform. And I can promise you this, his statistics may not match up to this new breed of Mike Leach quarterback, but Mike Leach will never have a more competitive quarterback than we had in John Bond. Now, those are the things that really fire me up, because the first ball game I ever attended, November 1st, 1980, and John beats Alabama. I mean, and I remember later that year, we're getting ready to play Nebraska. My mom told me, she goes, I don't want you to get your hopes up. Nebraska's just in a different league than Mississippi State. I'm like, Mama, but we beat Alabama, so. But, I have a lot of respect for John, not just as a player, but as a person. And, really think he's going to do some great things down there coaching high school football. And it's just rewarding, to see my hero still be honored as a hero by the people that I care about. I've shared this so many times to people. I'm not just passing through. I'm never going to go, cover the Miami Heat or New York Yankees. I mean, this is it for me. I mean, this was the destination job for me, was to cover Mississippi State. And you know what? If I never write another book that has Ole Miss mentioned in and outside of an Egg Bowl, that's fine too. I'm a Mississippi State lover, not so much the Ole Miss hater that I'm painted out to be. But, I want Mississippi State to do well. And I love living here. I love being able to get up and go to the ball games. And I've shared many times that probably the closest that I am to God at any point in my life is when I'm leaving Duty Noble Field, walking in my car, and I take that turn and I walk back there, and it's almost like I can hear my dad, because my dad brought me to so many games, watch Mississippi State play. And for a moment there, I can almost feel like that he's there. And it's like sometimes I get all misty-eyed thinking about it. I'll make that turn. And I think I'm just so grateful, to be here and to have these opportunities, because you guys are the people that I care about, I'd love to have all the money, but, I wanted to do something great and tell the Mississippi State story to Mississippi State people. That's my base. That's my audience. They'll never put me in the Hall of Fame. That's never going to happen.
What about that, Steve?
I'm okay with all that stuff too. I enjoy what I do, and I enjoy our fan base, and it has been the greatest joy of my life to be able to tell the Mississippi State story and to document some of these great stories before some of our legends are gone for future generations. That is a responsibility that I take very seriously.
Steve, you said all that, and thank you for what you do for Mississippi State. I've always admired you. That when I first started listening to you, the reason I admired you was the self-loathing Mississippi State fans, because I am so tired of that. And when I heard, I was like, "Who is this guy?" I was like, "I already like him because he thinks like me." But when you hold our self-loathing Mississippi State fans accountable and their feet to the fire about things, and I always continue to do that. Thank you for that. But you've done so much for Mississippi State. I think you've done so much for writers in Mississippi. I think you've inspired so many people to do those things. And Stephen and I, we talk about this all the time about our show and each other, that and even Mississippi State, that people want to put us in a box and want you to stay there. And the show's not going to do it. Our show's not going to do it. You haven't done it. And those are the kind of people that we want to bring on the show. And so thank you for what you've done for everybody.
Well, thanks for that. I'll tell you that, I think, I tell people all the time, they're sitting your grandpa's Mississippi State, and we have matured so much as a university. And I think Dr. Markinum is committed to athletics, and I think it shows in the budgetary increases they've given for athletics. They've used the SEC network money wise, so they've spread that around and distributed it to help Mississippi State be competitive on all fields and courts of play. Dr. Keenum's a Bulldog. John Cohen is a Bulldog.
Yeah.
So they understand it. And I don't think, this is the destination job for them. That's one of the things that we have coaches at times that comes through, and, it is a stepping stone job for them. It's not a destination, with the exception of maybe baseball. Baseball is a destination job. We're in the top 10 programs in America, and how blessed are we in Mississippi, to be honest with you, to kind of get on the soapbox here for a second, to have had Delta State, to have Southern Miss as a strong G5 program, and to have State and Ole Miss that routinely host, regionals and are competing in the College World Series every year. And look at what that does to high school baseball. Look at what that does to youth baseball. I joke with people, and I wrote about this in Alpha Dogs. Every time you see some little leaguer wearing number 15, beating it down the line on a ground ball back to the pitcher, running as hard as he can, that's the Jake Mangum effect, And there, as John Bond was my hero, I think about, look at all these great players that have come through our state institutions here in the last 10 years, and look at the young people they're influencing. They're showing that you don't have to leave the state of Mississippi to play championship caliber baseball. You can get to Omaha by staying home. And, and listen, I want that to be us, but at the same time too, I'm so glad that I'm alive in an era that it is so competitive, and the games matter. It's not just, another weekend. It's an important part of things, and but it excites me to think about what there is to come. But I'm excited about Dr. Keenum and John Cohen's leadership, and we built this stadium, and everybody tells you it's the best stadium in college baseball. I guess with the exception of Arkansas and Ole Miss fans that have probably never even left the county. But I've traveled this conference, and I've covered a college baseball game in all but two stadiums in the conference. And South Carolina is one. Everybody tells me, some of our baseball parents will tell you, outside of Duty Noble, the one in South Carolina is legit. And so I get out and I go travel, and it gives you a greater appreciation for what we have.
Yeah.
And when I get back and I go to Duty Noble, sometimes I kind of pinch myself and I said, I can't believe this place is ours. We're not at a regional somewhere. We're not at Omaha. This is our home stadium. And the cool thing is like you get there early sometimes, before the world went crazy, and you get a chance to visit with some of those opposing fans. Some of those non-conference fans, like during the regionals and that sort of stuff, and they just can't believe it. They all want to hang out after a ball game and get pictures made with Hobie or get out in left field lounge. And even though they've lost the ball game, they feel like they've had a good experience. And I think that speaks well, not just for the commitment to baseball, but our fans as well.
You mentioned that, Steve, of what it's done for the state. I'm 4 minutes from DeSoto Central Hospital right now. I'm 8 minutes away from Snowden Grove Park, where they hold the Dizzy Dean World Series, which I was fortunate to win one year with my daughter in softball.
How cool is
that's my claim to fame for right now, right? But you've nailed it. You nailed it on the head. Is that it's done so much, and here, locally in DeSoto County, any kid that's a promising player they immediately start asking these 13, 14-year-old kids, well, hey, who do you like? You like State or Ole Miss? It amazes me that I was like, one, we're putting that pressure on kids. I think it's terrible. But two, there's an expectation here that, hey, if you're a superstar, you should go to State or Ole Miss. And of course, I was a little sad about Blaze Jordan. His father was a year older than me in school, but I was so happy that the thought that him coming to State, and of course, I understood why he went professional, but there's a huge expectation here in the state of Mississippi, especially in DeSoto County. And, I live here in Hernando, and, it's the same thing is that, hey, what kids do we have in the county that could be going to play for the Bulldogs next year? And so a huge testament to that. And I always take it back to Ron Polk. I think Ron Polk started that for everybody in the state of Mississippi.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And, the thing about Polky was, too, is that, because at the time, Ole Miss really wasn't a lot of competition for in-state recruits. I mean, Jake Gibbs and those guys are great coaches, but facility-wise and program-wise, they were behind State. Back in the early 70s, State and Ole Miss split the SEC West just about every year. Matter of fact, I wrote about that in Alpha Dogs with Ted Milton, about Mike Profit going over there and beating Ole Miss and what a big deal that was. And I interviewed Brantley Jones during Stark Villains. He talked about playing against Archie and, striking out their last hitter to win the West and go win an SEC championship against Tennessee. But, during the 80s, Ole Miss was kind of an also ran in the SEC. And so they've made that rivalry mean a lot more. But, yeah, Polk is the one that kind of built the brand. He's the godfather of baseball. And even Skip Bertman will tell you that. Skip Bertman, despite all the great things he did at LSU, I've talked with him several times. And he says, when Ryan got the job at Mississippi State, he showed people you could make money on baseball. And I really think Ron doesn't get enough credit because even some of our own fans are all upset. He's so obsessed with NCAA or whatever. But you know what? Ron made baseball a revenue-producing sport at Mississippi State. And listen, we had some great coaches, Coach Gregory and Coach DeArmey was a huge part of building Duty Noble Field. But we've always been great at baseball. But Ron Polk is what made us a national contender.
Yeah. This will be my last thing, and I'll get quiet. Stephen and I had John Bond on the show earlier this year, all back in 2020. And after the interview was over, it was a phenomenal interview. Stephen asked him about how he's doing with COVID. And John, in typical John Bond fashion, said, this COVID thing's not that bad. He goes, I wear this gaiter over my face so I don't have to shave every day. And no one knows that I got beer on my breath. And so he was typical John Bond. And when the interview was over, I stole a line from David Lee Roth. I was like, Stephen, a lot of people throw a good party. John Bond is the party.
Oh, true. Yeah. Now, he's dialed it back a little bit in his older years, thank goodness. He probably wouldn't still be with us. But, I mean, and to about the COVID stuff, I mean, listen, I got a family of 6, and everybody in my family's had it but me, And one thing I want to say before I get out of here, it's back in March when David Johnson got it, Dave is my friend, and, people always joke about the State Ole Miss thing, but right. I don't see David as an Ole Miss guy, even though I know that he is. David Johnson's my friend. And Dave and I were in Nashville at the 247 SEC Publishers Convention, and I always look forward to seeing David kind of comparing notes and seeing how Eli and those guys are doing, his family. And so we go up there and we hang out, and then the next day we sit next to each other and, we're breathing the same air in and everything else. And then by the night, Dave's too sick to come to dinner. And we didn't know anything then. I mean, that's, like I've had people say, I can't believe he would go. We didn't know. I think at the time there were 4 cases in Nashville. So it wasn't like, I mean, at that point, we get home and they cancel the SEC basketball tournament. They cancel the NBA. So it's like all this is happening. We're all freaking out. Well, Dave tells me in hindsight, 2 days later, he was in ICU. It's so like, it's one of those things that this thing is no respecter of persons, and it makes you very grateful. I told my doctor that I think I've been around about 20 different people that have been infected with COVID, and I haven't gotten it, or if I did, I would say symptomatic. And he goes, Steve, we have a medical term for that. And I goes, really, what's that? He said, fortunate. Fortunate.
Yes.
So, I've been very fortunate with all that, but listen, there are a lot of people out there that have really struggled. And I tell you, every day when I got up, Dave Johnson was on my mind when he was in the hospital, because then like people were telling us he had about a 5% chance to live. And it almost gives you a little bit of survivor's guilt. You begin to think, I haven't even had a fever. Here my friend is, fighting for his life, and it just didn't seem fair. But he made it, and he's doing great. And it makes you appreciate those friendships even more. And I remember I called him, and we both got emotional on the phone. We're just talking about how grateful we were, because he was worried that we all got it. He was worried that perhaps he had spread it to us. And fortunately, we were all fine. But it's like when those kind of things happen, a lot of this bitterness and animosity and that sort of stuff, it really takes a back seat. You begin to realize, that people matter more than the personalities and the principles of all that sort of stuff. But I'm glad that my friend Dave Johnson's doing well. And, I got excited this year when, when I heard that he was going to be back and being able to ride again. I thought, he'll never have a football season probably that means more to him than this one, just because of the fact of what we've been through. And, but yeah, I think it's important to kind of understand with all that stuff that, people are what matters most. And, the chances of all of us getting together and, having a drink and having a good time and nobody getting in an argument are pretty slim, Yeah,
yes.
But at the end of the day, we're all riding this rock together. And I think sometimes everything is bigger than our disagreements and our differences. I think, there's all this craziness in our country right now. And listen, I'm an apolitical person. I do vote and that sort of stuff. I keep that stuff to myself because I'm a business person. I'm not trying to go out there and make anybody angry. But, there's just a respect. It's like, and I wrote about this yesterday. It's just, I respect all people. Not like, but I respect them. I don't want anybody to tell me how to live or how to dress or what to wear or how to cut my hair or anything like that. And you know what? I don't care how you wear your hair. It makes no difference to me. I don't spend any time worrying about how another man wears his hair. It means absolutely nothing to me, but I respect your right to do it. I respect your right to say it. And I think that's where, if we can find some commonality when it comes to respect, if we can respect each other, even if we're wrong, I respect the fact that you believe passionately about something that I may not agree with. I don't think you're an idiot. You've got reasons to believe what you want to believe, and I don't have to subscribe to that. But I think, I guess it was Mark Twain that said, I'm paraphrasing here, but slander is the tool of the loser of the debate, and that's what happens. Is when we have to start getting personal to win an argument with somebody, we've already run out of bullets. We don't have enough, confidence in our own beliefs. When we got to start getting personal and start shooting at somebody else and saying, oh, well, you look funny, or, you should have been a Backstreet Boy or something like that. The debate is over and you lost. And so, again, and I guess we'll part with that, but I just think that everybody, whether it be college football related, political related, religious related, whatever, if you just give everybody a little room and love them where they are, rather than you would have them to be, life would be a whole lot better for all of us.
Yeah. Steve, I'm going to steal one of your lines. The song of the show, Apolitical Blues by Van Halen on the OU812 album. It was the extra song on the CD way back in the day. And after I listened to that song, I've always wondered why Van Halen never did a blues album. It was a phenomenal song, but feel free to check that one out.
I'll do it.
Hey, man, look, thank you so much for joining us today. And we hope we haven't taken up too much of your time.
No, thank you guys so much. You guys have a great day.
You too. Thank you so much. And hopefully we can do it again soon.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, man, that was awesome. Thank him so much for coming on, bud.
Yeah, I'm a fan of Steve's. I listen to his podcast. I've read his books. I will admit, I haven't read the newest book. I always kept thinking, I've had an anniversary. I've had a Christmas, and I didn't get that book and that's what my wife kept asking me, and friends and family. And it's like, hey, what can I get you? I'd love to have Steve's book. So I got gift cards. So go figure.
Yeah. Well, let's go on ahead now, and because we've talked a lot about with our guests the national championship game. Now let's give you our thoughts, man. What are your thoughts on Monday night's matchup?
I foresaw everything last week, and shockingly, I nailed it with Ohio State and Clemson. Nailed it to a T. This week, I really think Ohio State is coming in hot. They're coming in confident. And Alabama better not come out slow at all. If Alabama comes out slow, kind of like what they did against Clemson a couple of years ago, and then, they had an untimely turnover there in the second quarter, and then Clemson blew that game wide open. Bama could have that same exact game and take a loss again if they do that with this Ohio State team. I expect Ohio State to come in with a scheme. I think they come in with a plan. I think they're going to come in red hot, focused like they did last week. But I see Bama fighting back. I expect this game to be a track meet. That's why I asked Bear that question earlier in today's show. If this turns out to a track meet, who does it favor? And my thought was his same thought as well. And Bear knows more than I do. I want to stress that. But, Bear thought this goes to Alabama if it turns into a track meet. I think this game's going to be close. This game's going to come down to turnovers, and I'm liking Alabama in this game. If someone makes a mistake in this game, especially if you've scored 2 touchdowns and you get a timely turnover and great field position, this game could get ugly for either side. But I do like Alabama to win the national championship. I will say this, Stephen. I expect this game to be really close in the first half. I don't think at halftime we're going to know who's going to win this game. But I do expect Alabama to raise the trophy there at the end.
I agree with that, but I'm actually going with Ohio State. I'm going with the Buckeyes. And the reason why I'm going with the Buckeyes is because I think the Steve Sarkisian story is really going to hurt Alabama. I really feel like that, just simply because, the last 2 times this has happened to Alabama, it happened when Lane Kiffin took the FAU job, and Alabama lost to Clemson 35-31 on the last play of the game with 1 second left. And then Mike Locksley took the Maryland job, stayed at Alabama, and Alabama got beat in blowout fashion that year to Clemson again. I think this is going to be a black eye for Alabama. I think it's going to be a distraction, and I think Ohio State is the fresher football team. And also, let me say this. Dabo said they've only played 6 games. I'm placing them number 11. That is bulletin board material right there for Ryan Day. They came out with a chip on their shoulders. They proved him wrong. Kristen Saban says Ohio State wants to postpone the game because of COVID. Blah, blah. That is bulletin board material, folks, for Ryan Day. Once again, I think Ohio State comes out with a chip on their shoulders again. I think Alabama's defense has been suspect at best because in the first half of the Notre Dame game, nobody's talking about this, but in the first half, at halftime, Notre Dame was losing, but Notre Dame was averaging 5 yards per play. That's a rather interesting little stat there. Ohio State has the weapons that Florida does and that Ole Miss does. I think I don't think Alabama can stop them. I think Twitter is going to blow up with Pete Golding, everybody wanting him to be fired from Alabama's standpoint. I think they get exposed a little bit, and I'm actually going with Ohio State in this one.
Wow. I would kind of lean that way if this was not the greatest Nick Saban team of all time.
Right.
I think that's going to be the difference maker. And I don't expect Jalen Waddle to do much in this game. But, if they could just put Jalen Waddle back there for punt returns or kickoff returns, I think that could be a huge, huge difference. And hey, Alabama's Alabama. Even if you drew up 4 plays for Jalen Waddle, even if you just drew up 4 plays, that can be a difference maker in that game. And I'm not talking about a touchdown on a 4th and 2 from the 8-yard line. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about, let's draw up this play. It's a 3rd and 12. We're looking at a 3rd and 8 we really need to keep this drive going. They've scored touchdowns on their last 2 drives. That's where I think a Jalen Waddle package can come into play, that they're going to draw something up for Jalen to get him first down, not necessarily a touchdown. So I'm going to be interested to see how they're going to use Jalen, if they use him at all. But with all of that being said, Stephen, I just think it's a Nick Saban team that I think it's his best. And I'm not one that drinks the Kool-Aid of Nick Saban, but it's kind of hard to deny the fact that this is probably his greatest team ever.
Right.
And that's why I'm going with the top.
All right. Well, do you have anything else to add before we wrap it up here on the Stingray Show?
I want to personally thank Chris Felica for coming on the show today from ESPN's College Game Day. Also want to thank best-selling author Steve Robertson for stopping in. And yes, I got a little long-winded with Steve. I would have sat here and talked to Steve for another 3 hours, but I want to thank both of our guests for coming on. And Stephen, I want to thank you for all the stuff that you do. Today I'm a little under the weather. I've lost my voice. I'm hoping to gain that back. But, Stephen, you do a lot of work for this show. And I tell you thank you all the time off the show. But, I'm going to give you a little pop. Stephen usually lines up all of our guests, and he gets everything done. He gets the highlights. He does everything. So, Stephen, to you, huge props to you. And thank you for being Stingray on the Stingray Show.
Thank you, man. And I really would like to for you to keep talking, because I'm actually behind the scenes pulling up something so that we can end with this. So going ahead and talk just for a little bit more, and pulling up our last little thing. If you don't mind.
Yeah, I don't mind at all. The national championship game coming up here this Monday night. It's going to be fun to see what happens. Again, very special thank you, Chris Felica from ESPN College Game Day, to coming on the show. Also to the 247 reporter, best-selling author, Steve Robertson, for stopping by. And guess what? You can always catch the show on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and on Facebook. And we'll be back here again next week talking detail here on the Stingray Show.
Yeah, man. And real quick, I could not find the graphic that I wanted to for your neck of the woods, but I am going to real quick pull up the double box here. I'm actually going to share the screen because I actually have something to show you, Heath. Let me go ahead and make sure. There is actually a chance of snow for Mississippi, including Memphis, Hernando, and even as far south as Columbus, Philadelphia, and the Jackson metro area. Sunday night into Monday morning, 1 to 2 inches of rain or snow is possible with higher amounts. So I want you guys to be abreast of the latest weather information because, it could be rather treacherous out there Sunday night into Monday morning. And this does include the Memphis area and, of course, Hernando and Oxford. So I just wanted to go ahead and throw that out there, that there will be a snow potential Sunday night into Monday morning. And it probably will get more in depth as we get closer to that time frame.
And Stephen, the dairy farmers and the bread producers of the Mid-South would love to thank you, because now all the milk and bread have just sold out at our local grocery stores.
Yes. So there's that. All right, man. Well, that's going to do it for the Stingray Show. Once again, I'm going to put this up here just so that you reminder that Monday night we have the national championship game between number 1 Alabama and number 3 Ohio State. And we also have a very special announcement that Monday morning, to get ready for this game, we are going to have a very special guest. We're going to have a special edition of the Stingray Show early Monday morning, as we're going to be interviewing Coach Hugh Freeze of the Liberty Flames, as he is going to talk to us about the Liberty Flames football season, the Cure Bowl win, And then, of course, him getting ready to help out ESPN with that game right there Monday night.
Yeah, so it's going to be a fun week next week. Heaven forbid if I live through wintry death 2021 here in Northwest Mississippi.
So enjoy your college football, everybody. Now the NFL, there are playoff games this weekend. It is the wild card weekend. And for any basketball fans out there, the Iron Bowl of the Hardwood is tomorrow, Alabama at Auburn. But until then, until next Monday, we hope you have a great weekend. And as always, God bless.
The Dogs and Stingray are coming for you.
This is Stephen Ray, a.k.a. Stingray, coming to you live from Tuscaloosa, Alabama. Good afternoon, Mr. Feinbaum. Stingray here, and I'm about to shoot the bull with you like all the Auburn students do down at Auburn.
Worst defense ever!
So without further ado, here is the biggest Alabama going for the field goal. The kick is up. It is away. It is no good. Chris Davis bringing it out of the end zone. Oh, he's got blockers. Chris Davis up the sideline. Here he goes.
Here we go, guys. Dobbs back to pass. Launching the ball. Jennings, he's got it. Jennings, he's got it. Touchdown, Tennessee. They shocked the Dogs in Sanford Stadium. Are you kidding me? My God almighty. What an epic way for the Tennessee-Georgia rivalry to end.